So let me fill you in on what the Americans are up to in Niger. The United States is withdrawing its troops, not from Niger, but from Niamey, from the capital. You need to understand that while the French have 3 military bases in Niger, one in Niamey in the capital, and as I showed you, another one in Walam and Ayoru. The Americans, they have one in Niamey, which is Air Base 101, and then another in Agadez called Air Base 201. For those of you who are familiar with the military or history, you know your history, this is not the 101st Airborne, okay? It's just called 101. Right now, the United States have 1,100 troops in Niger. They have evacuated and withdrawn all non-essential personnel as of yesterday, and now they're moving their troops from the capital, Niamey, from Air Base 101 to Air Base 201. Let us be frank. The United States are not in as bad of a spot as their French allies, relatively speaking. Does that mean that Niger are happy with the Americans being there? No, they're not. But because there is such a cloud of neocolonialism hanging over this horrific past with the Americans, everyone understands that the Americans are also there for to their benefit. They're not in Niger because they care about fighting jihadists. This is a rubbish excuse. This is propaganda. This is this is propaganda of the highest order. They create problems in Whitehall, in Washington. They create problems in the Middle East and Africa and then pretend that they are there to save you. Oh, the white man is here to save you from the evil jihadists and ISIS and Al-Qaeda, which, oh, by the way, we helped create. The Americans know that they need to get back, physically get back. That's why they have pulled out and withdrawn over there to Agadez. Now, Agadez, let me just ask you something right now before I continue. And I want you to comment right now whether you're watching live or you're watching on replay. Especially Americans, especially if you're an American. Have you ever heard of Agadez or Air Base 201? Do you know what that is? Please tell me right now in the comments. You should have heard of it. You should know it because you paid for it. You paid for it, my friends. You paid for Air Base 201. You know how much this base cost? This base cost over $100 million, right? It's one of those massive sinkholes that you have in the Pentagon. You guys know that the Pentagon have been audited, I think, twice, maybe 3 times. But the point here is that every single time that they've been audited, trillions of dollars are unaccounted for. Oh, gee, I haven't the foggiest where these dollars could have, could have gone to. Maybe everyone just likes coffee and, right? Stacking up on donuts. I don't know. Or, it goes towards projects that are not exactly kosher, right? That you can't talk about in front of a congressional hearing. The truth is that Air Base 201 in Niger is the largest American drone base, not in Niger, not in Africa, in the world. This is the largest American drone base in the world. And when you have a country that has 800 bases, I'd say that's pretty unique. That sticks out, right? Something special about this. I did a video about this about 2 years ago. You'll find it on the channel. It's called America's Shadow War in Africa or something like that. Shadow War in Africa. The Americans have a military presence in 50 out of 54 African countries. Okay? And of course, the way that they do this, and by the way, this is a note for my video about Syria, is that, for example, in Syria, they say, oh, we only have 900 troops there. Only. Except they're all illegal. They don't have any visas or permission to even be in Syria. But it's just 900. That's not true. The true figure is in the thousands. Why? Because you have people known as contractors, right? Or consultants, which is a nice way of saying, somebody who's either a spook or also a grunt carrying a gun. I'm actually curious, have any of you ever worked as consultants or contractors for the military? I'm quite sure that it's more common than you think, but and I'm pretty sure we'll get a couple of yeses in the comment section. In Niger, the Americans have a very, 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 big incentive to stay there, right? I mean, Jesus Christ, this thing cost over $100 million. It wasn't supposed to be. It was supposed to be cheaper and supposed to be completed much earlier. But of course, the money just keeps disappearing and it takes forever. And, yeah, I think that's shocking, honestly, that most Americans don't even know about this. And they're there's an entire war being waged from that thing. It's being used to support so-called anti-ISIS efforts in Africa and the Middle East. It's a complete lie. It's more of like for drone striking weddings and funerals and stuff. But I don't want to get too grim, but that's the truth. Victoria Nuland arrived in Niger right after the coup. Do you remember? I mean, I was kind of shocked, and I found it funny and also disgusting at the same time, because look what happened. She had just got promoted. Victoria Nuland, who is like, the female version of Dick Cheney. Or, just like an absolute goddamn monster, like something out of the, Doom. And has done nothing but destroy countries like Ukraine, just going there to impose American foreign policy. And again, when we say American foreign policy, it's really just these, elites, these corporations in Washington and Wall Street that are running the show. She is their representative. So now she is the number 2 person in the State Department. She is the next person under Blinken. Can you believe that? And Blinken himself, I mean, he's, he was with Obama. They screwed up Syria. When I say screwed up, I mean, they it's not like they had any business being there. No, they destroyed it. And they did the same thing to Yemen. So Victoria Nuland gets promoted, and she goes to Niger because she thinks that, I'm the American, I'm the number 2 American at the State Department, so they're going to roll out a red carpet for me and treat me like I'm royalty and something. And no, that's not what happens. You know how they treated Victoria Nuland? They gave her the finger. They did not even meet with her. That is how much, they resent her and what she represents and the interests that she represents. They did not even meet with her. Remember, she's ostensibly, allegedly a diplomat. Yes? Right? So on paper, the actions in diplomacy speak louder than words. So, when Biden went to Saudi Arabia and no one went to meet him at the airport, like no one of importance, you're sending a message. You're saying we don't really respect you. We're not going to give you special treatment. You're not welcome here. And that's exactly what happened in Niger. So Bazoum, who's the deposed president, they would not let her meet with him. Although he does get to call Macron every day. So I guess there's that. Maybe he can call Nuland. Victoria Nuland was not allowed to meet Bazoum. And she was not allowed to meet anyone, from the top brass of the presidential guard. Remember, the coup leaders are from the presidential guard. It's funny because they actually put down a coup in a couple of years ago, right? So they're supposed to be protecting the president from such a thing. But this shows you that, you got a lot of young men, our generation in Africa, in the Middle East, who are just sick of being controlled by people in Wall Street and people in the city, okay? The city of London, which is the financial district in London, right? They have had enough. Even to the point that one of one of these people who actually did meet with Nuland was groomed by the United States, right? He was groomed to be, the man, right? That's how they refer to him in this in the article that I read to you, right? So basically, he was the point man for all the Americans who were running around, in Niger, whether they're State Department, Pentagon, spooks, whatever. They groomed him to be their guy in the Nigerian army, and he just gave them the finger. The article finished with one sentence, right? And I talked about this with Glenn Greenwald yesterday. He was asked, about his intentions, and he said, like, even that he would risk anything, even his life, to have independence and have sovereignty. Okay, so I want you to understand that the Americans, they have a lot of vested interests in Niger. They are not welcome in Niger, but they're not in as bad of a position as the French because of the neo-colonial history with the French. So where does that leave us? Well, that leaves us with either a partial withdrawal, perhaps, they've already withdrawn from Niamey, right? But the French, I think their withdrawal will be a complete, full withdrawal. There is no way that Niger or rather Niamey are going to accept, like a few French troops staying. No, it's you get out. The Americans are, a tougher nut to crack. And like I said, there isn't this resentment to at the same level that there is towards the French. And one thing you have to understand is that the Americans are Machiavellian. Okay, when I say the Americans, I mean, of course, people in Washington. And you should not put it past them to screw France in order to stay in Niger. Do you understand what I'm telling you? The Americans, I think, are going to play this situation as follows. They are going to allow and maybe even help Niger get rid of the French in order for a limited amount of troops to stay in Niger because of the drone base, especially Air Base 201, because they have a huge incentive to stay there. Let me give you an analogy and a real life example of this happening. The Americans did it to France with Australia. Do you guys remember that the French had signed a deal to supply Australia with 30 diesel-powered submarines, okay? Now, when it comes to submarines, you have diesel-powered and nuclear-powered, okay? Nuclear-powered does not mean that there are nuclear weapons on board. It just means that you're using a reactor instead of diesel, and it can stay submerged for longer times, provided you have enough air and food and so on, right? They're just better. What happened is that the French called this the deal of the century, which sounds like something, Trump coined. But they really, they were being paid like billions for these submarines. It was ridiculous. It's like, they're almost ripping the Australians off, right? And here's what happens. The Americans and us, the British, went to the Australians, right? Because they're a Five Eyes country, and told them, drop the deal with the French. We're going to give you nuclear-powered submarines. Not nuclear-armed, so no nuclear weapons, but nuclear-powered. And of course, this is to do with provoking China. The French, they found out, and they were fuming. They were goddamn fuming. How could you do this to us? This was such a stab in the back that the French, you know what they did? They recalled their ambassadors. Let me explain to you. In diplomacy, okay, let me explain to you how this works in diplomacy. There's like a scale of how bad things are in a relationship with another country. Now, obviously, the worst thing right at the top would be completely severing ties and just cutting all ties with that country. Underneath that, you have the expulsion or the withdrawal, or rather recalling of ambassadors. Okay, so when France say, hey, you, our ambassador in Washington, we want you to come home to Paris for consultation, that is sending a message to the Americans saying that we are so goddamn pissed off at you that we don't even want our ambassador in your country anymore. That is how much how much resentment we have towards you, right? How upset we are. Okay, that's like the second worst thing you can have in terms of diplomatic relations. So France did that, right? To show, like, even the United States, right? They recalled their ambassador, right? And you remember Macron was so angry, and he started calling the Australian Prime Minister, what did he call it? I forgot what he said. He's a liar or something, and they had a spat, basically, so on. Didn't matter, right? It didn't matter that we had, we've been allies with the French for decades, right? That we fought alongside each other in World War II. It doesn't matter. Washington wanted and Washington got. And you can include Whitehall in there, if you will, as well, because the UK and the US and Australia together made this alliance called AUKUS, right? Which is, one of the most horrible names, but it is logical, right? So don't put it past Washington to screw the Elysee, right? To screw Paris and stab them in the back. If they can, they'll do it at the drop of a hat, right? Now, just again, to be clear, Victoria Nuland was not allowed to meet with the top brass of the Presidential Guard nor with Bazoum, the deposed president. So I am not saying that they made some kind of deal. No. This is a long-term thing, right? The Americans, by withdrawing from Niamey, they're signaling to Niger that we are not a threat. Okay, we do not intend on, staying here and being stubborn like the French are. We're just going to withdraw to Airbase 201 because it's also a more important and valuable base, right? And they're also on edge. They're on thin ice. So when they send home the non-essential personnel, these are steps that you would take before withdrawal. Right, so the Americans are signaling that maybe if you really want us to get out, I guess we'll have to get out. We'll see what happens. Like I said, the Americans are not in as bad of a situation as the French. The French, no one wants them in Niger. It is over. France-Afrique, French neocolonialism is dead, gone, and buried. You saw those people with their this killed me, honestly. Look how funny that is.
Anti-French sentiment has been rising since Niger's
it's like that meme where they're carrying the coffin and dancing. This is this tops that.
July, however, relations soured.
Oh my goodness! So we shall see what happens. And remember, ECOWAS, the regional alliance that is chaired by Nigeria at present, is a tool used by the United States. It's a tool used by France, and if they can envisage a war with Niger, and they're crazy enough to do it, I mean, of course the French would be behind that, because it's difficult for France right now to move inside Niger without showing to the world that actually we are still a neo-colonial power and we still own Niger. So they have to do it through ECOWAS as well, right? So on the one hand, they're saying we don't recognize you, we're not leaving, right? They're trying to play that game. They think they're smart. And then on the other hand, they're pushing ECOWAS, right? Nigeria, unfortunately, has not seen the light, shall we say, and has not broken completely from the neo-colonial European American structure in Africa. But we'll see what happens. We'll see what happens. Of course, I've been following this and reporting on this for every step of the way. So everything you need to know about Niger, it's all right here on the channel. I've made a playlist for you. And whatever the Americans, whatever the French do, I'm covering it. It's here, and I'm gonna have all the breaking news for you all the time.